that, I am going to introduce John Linford. So, uh, so John, I think some of you may know John. We have worked with John for quite some time. Tony introduced us to John some time ago. He works for something called the Open Group. Now, that might sound like it may be hard to understand that the Open Group, because the term open, it's not just about secure, it's not just about open source, but John is the Open Group Security Portfolio Forum Director. So he gets the job of kind of facilitating the creation and delivery of standards and certification programs for the security forum of the Open Group. And I'm sure he's going to tell us a little bit more about it. But that gives him an insight into several aspects of cybersecurity. And today we are going to have a kind of a one-on-one with him to talk about many areas. In particular, the title of this panel is "You Can't Manage What You Can't See: The Role for Open Standards in the Age of AI." And I know, Kate, this will be one of your favorite topics. So as we go through this, please ask questions. Don't be afraid to say, hey, I have a question. This is we want this to be an open discussion. Security and what we do in AI is really, really challenging right now. And adopting any kind of zero trust approach with AI is going to be challenging. So, John, why don't you say hello, introduce yourself, and we'll get started.
Great. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you all for having me here. Good to be back at Secure Chain Con, and I think it was at it's what was it called before?
Visionaries?
The New Mexico Tech um, conference, I think, is where Tony originally introduced us, Tracy,
That's true. It
like
is.
4 or
That's where
5
we
years ago.
met. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been cool to see Ortelius grow, to see this sort of project continue to grow and evolve. I am John Linford. I am staff at the Open Group, which is a global standards organization. So for those unfamiliar with us, we are primarily technology standards. We are vendor neutral. Uh, we are also an ISO fast track submitter. So one of the standards I'll mention, sort of my brief introduction, uh, is actually an ISO equivalent, which is pretty cool. Um, at the Open Group, I am the Security Portfolio Director. So as Tracy said, I help facilitate creation of standards and certification programs for the Security Forum, which is sort of the primarily cybersecurity risk quantification focused group within the Open Group, as well as for our Open Trusted Technology Forum, which is the supply chain side, both hardware and software, and our Assured Dependability Work Group, which is looking at sort of supplementing your enterprise architecture development, especially with security practices. Um, in getting sort of some initial notes put together for this to kick off the discussion, I came across the McKinsey's report from 2025, or the state of AI in 2025. As we all know, the vast majority of organizations are using AI regularly in at least one business function. 88% as of 2025, up from 78% in 2024. Be really interesting to see what that looks like in 2026 with token cost adjustments, and sort of the shift in how we're understanding AI can be used. Um, we also know that AI is scaling more in larger organizations, perhaps unsurprisingly, but still quite a lot of uptake and adoption in smaller, medium-sized businesses as well. Now, what's challenging with that is we don't necessarily know where AI is actually being used or precisely why it's being used. The people using AI may or may not have followed corporate policy. They may or may not be using approved tools, approved systems. They may or may not be handling the data that they are feeding these AI tools appropriately as well. So AI can provide immense value, but it also can really easily detract or introduce new security vulnerabilities and threats to an organization. On the other side, we can also see AI being very valuable for actually understanding those. So over the last year, I've seen various vendors talk about their AI capabilities with some of their products for helping compile your SBOM, going through your software and looking at what are all of the bits and pieces that go in there, recognizing different code snippets and understanding what open source project that might have originated or from in the first place. But we've also seen it being used for vulnerability traceability. So actually looking at your software, throwing the AI at it and seeing what path would actually be required to be taken to get to a vulnerability. So definitely a step forward in being able to prioritize where and how you go about remediating those vulnerabilities and actually doing patching. And with sort of the broader theme for Secure Chain Con this year, especially for those products that are in deployment and actively being used, not just in the development aspect of that. So being able to prioritize stuff that's actually in production. Now, the other sort of fun side of that, I'd be remiss to talk about having a number of friends who are developers, is those who've used AI to help develop their code when they go back and look at it months, potentially a year or so later, trying to understand how on earth the security vulnerability got there in the first place, and struggling to understand the logic behind how and why the system was built the way that it was, perhaps relying too heavily on those AI tools to help build and structure that code. So just another fun aspect to be thinking about with where AI can throw some complications in there. Really, all of this, though, comes together to emphasize just how important human skills, knowledge, and your organizational culture are, right? As long as AI remains a tool and we understand its limitations, its value, where and how it can be used, it's still the people who are going to be making those decisions, and being able to support those people is fundamental. So this gets to building a security culture, having it be a DevSecOps approach, not just DevOps with security off somewhere to the side that security is just their problem. If a security thing happens, it's their fault. They'll fix it. I don't need to think about security. So that's where we also see the role for, in this case, open standards, stuff like what the security form's putting together with its security roles and glossary standard. So actually understanding your security accountabilities and responsibilities, regardless of whether you have a security first job, whether you have some sort of hybrid where it's just a small aspect of your job, or whether on face value, you don't actually have anything to do with security, but realistically, what you're doing could have security consequences. More broadly, above that, then, other open standards such as that ISO equivalent I mentioned, the Open Trusted Technology Provider Standard, the OTTPS standard, its technical equivalent is ISO 20243, that provide requirements and recommendations across your organization that everyone can focus around. So getting into aspects of the secure development of your products, into the continuous support and maintenance of what you're actually selling to your customers, and then even getting all the way to the end of that product lifecycle with things like secure disposal. And with the next iteration, also looking into some recycling and reclamation. So yeah, it's an interesting space. There's a lot going on here. AI's complicating it wonderfully. Not even gotten into post-quantum and all of that fun with the cryptography aspect that comes into it. But hopefully that has set the stage now well for a little bit of conversation.
Yeah, I think that one of our biggest challenges is that AI has been adopted so fast. I don't think we've ever seen a technology that was adopted so rapidly. And as Tony always says, time to value, right? I think that when I first started using ChatGPT, the time to value was probably less than a minute. When I realized, hey, this is really cool, I can use this for a lot of things. Um, and it felt like everything was perfectly accurate in the beginning, but then after I used it for a while, I realized it can be as Sasha Wharton calls it, a naughty schoolboy who would just give you any answer and hope for the best. Um, so I think that the human factor has a lot to do with the challenges that we're facing right now, because anything that's presented to us in a pretty way, we might assume is correct.
Mhm.
And we would never know if there was a vulnerability in there. Like the one I think is the scariest is the memory poisoning. But from a developer standpoint, what are the skill gaps? And, how do we get our developers in the mindset of developing secure AI applications when they're relying on these foundational models that may not have a lot of security built in them? Is there a way we can think about it?
Yeah, definitely not an easy answer there. Um, I mean, we're still seeing, well, I guess the top level answer is it goes back to the educational programs. I know a lot of developers are self-taught, that they don't necessarily come out of, a higher education program, which is incredible. Um, but at the same time, an emphasis from those formal programs, from the online courses on keeping security as an aspect of that. Um, whether that be a module in some broader program or whether that be a continuous theme, realistically, would probably be the better approach to that, so that at every stage, every conversation has security as a consideration, one of those main topics that you're looking at, rather than just for 3 weeks, we're going to talk about security. It'll be on the test. That's when you need to think about it again. Because yeah, that's not how it works after college, is it? It is a continuous, ever-present aspect. Um, in terms of, the AI specifically, God, I guess probably, yeah, that I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase that. Yeah, just being mindful of what it can and cannot do. Um, early on, I don't recall who said it, but early on in sort of the AI adoption race, um, the best, it might have been at an RSA, the best reframing that I heard for thinking about AI is it's not artificial intelligence, it's just automated intelligence. So it's going to do what you've taught it to do. It's not necessarily going to go out and do something new and unique and create. What it does is going to most likely be built on what it's been trained on. So if it's been trained on very poor security practices, it's going to probably put out very poorly thought of security implementation. Um, and it doesn't know better, right? There's no reason for these AI programs or tools to think, loosely speaking, um, that they're doing anything wrong, right? Their inputs are poor security, their outputs will be poor security.
Is there a way to um, kind of force the models to actually, like if you're having it generate code, to generate more secure code? Because right now I just tell it to go generate me a this function to do XYZ. Do I need to tell it at the prompt level that I needed to make it secure? Since the model, like you said, it doesn't sound like AI is by default acting in secure practices. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I suspect it would help. I'm not going to pretend to know enough about prompt engineering to know just how you would present that. Um, but yeah, I guess depending on how you're implementing it, maybe looking at maybe like CVEs or CWEs as part of the consideration aspect, or if there are your top priority, do not include this kind of vulnerability in the code. Um, that might be useful. Um, at the same time, it could also just introduce, a new unique vulnerability that's not in that list that you wouldn't otherwise know to go think to look at or design around.
Yeah. And are these new models like Mythos, and there's another one that came out from Anthropic. I can't remember what it's called, but it goes along with the Codex. Are they getting better at being secure by default?
Um, that's a good question. That's not one that I have an answer for, actually. But I saw Kate raise her hand there.
Yeah, I think overall, what I see is that it is getting better. The security is getting better. One of the things that I enjoy about AI is that they're actually getting rid of code that's bad and they're moving on. They're not even trying to fix it. It's just like, yeah, this is garbage. And then they go on to something else. And I think that that's really important, as because security, I mean, we still say that security is almost like a bad word. It's like, and we still see that these are not best practices overall from a security standpoint. But what I am excited about with AI is that they exploit the weaknesses in code, and that's good in that we see it, and they also then the coding AI coding itself will actually dump it and make it better, tighter, is what I've seen. So
And I think that's where the human aspect of that comes back to be really important as well, of having the knowledge and skills to understand why that code actually is better. Because if you're just trusting that output to be better and you go back and look at it later and just assume it is better, and you don't understand kind of the fundamentals behind it and how to actually do those checks and confirmations, then, a year from now, 5 years from now, when you've maybe forgotten the context for it being put together in the first place, new vulnerabilities have been discovered. You still need that skill base to go back and confirm, yeah, it's actually still good, or no, it's now actually garbage.
and I don't even see it being like, I see things changing like 3 months.
Yeah.
Not even within the year. Like 3 months, things are just changing drastically. And I think overall, when it comes to coding, I really believe that, I'm the kind of person that's like, Tracy, as we always talk about, software bloating and reachability, baby. And let's get rid of it, folks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one way to do that, as we all know, is through SBOM. We're going to have a couple of really good presentations on SBOM after this talk. SBOMs after this talk. But we can't even SBOMs are hard to get people to start
Yeah.
generating unless we make them more operational. Is what this project is making the attempt to do. And now we have AI bombs. There's
Yeah.
also the Linux Foundation is also working on a new project for deployment bombs. And more to come on that. If you're involved in the Ortelius community, we'll probably be doing more work with the OpenSSF on deployment bombs. But AI bombs, the foundational models, we don't have an AI bomb for, but the smaller models we do. So, John, help us understand an AI bomb. Are they real? And are they accurate? Which is, one of the projects we're working on is to try to look at the integrity of an S bomb. So give us some insights on AI bombs.
Yeah, so, as far as I understand, AI bombs really are the components, bits, pieces that go into the AI models themselves. So considerations for the data that went into training it potentially, as well as some of the, I guess, interactions that it's relying upon for actually giving you those answers. So in the sense of, can you write one? Yes, they are real. In the broader, is it accurate? That's where I think it starts to get really complicated. Those data models, may or may not have been influenced in different ways. They may or may not still be up to date. Just like with, some of the really early criticisms of S-bombs being, what value do they provide? You've got one, cool. Do you do anything with it? Do you maintain it? Do you update it? Do you actually compare it to what you are using? Does it relate at all to what is actually in practice? Um, I think that's going to be the real kicker there for the AI bombs, um, especially if it's not your unique model. I can see if it is your unique proprietary internal, you built it, as you were saying, right? Those smaller models, not some of the bigger ones, where that, yeah, there's probably a good probability that it's going to be more likely to be accurate. But some of those bigger ones where, there's a new story every month or so of they've discovered that some of the data that went into training that AI was actually from some other data set that was not supposed to be used or accessed, and nobody gave permission for it to be used or accessed. That's I think where the complications will be there.
So is that what an AI bomb generally presents, is what model they were trained on? Or what the data is?
I believe it's a component of it. I know that this is something that's still in development for exactly what's going to go into the AI bomb. I think for those who know Alan Friedman, formerly with CISA, I know that some of the work he's starting to look at now is AI bombs, also hardware bills of materials, just sort of bills of materials in general is his focus. Um, but at least as far as I've seen, there's not great consistency on exactly what goes into an AI bomb just yet.
That's very true. Based on what I've seen so far, into the AI bombs, people include the most typical information: the model name, provenance, the location, and some information about artifacts which are in the model itself, some Python, PyTorch, or something like that. What should be there is also how the model was trained, based on what data, and so on, where it's exactly used, because that's what is really different in this area. And I think we discussed it with David from Manifest company, that we should also include information where you use this model, because model itself could be the same, and the way how I use it with my harness rules, and how someone else use this model with different harness rules, is a completely different story. The results for the same prompt could be different.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I know that that's I guess one of the instances I've seen of AI being used is right, the multiple agents checking each other's work, running the same prompt against the one agent multiple times and saying how the answer varies. And that actually was one of the tools that I saw for the agent checking vulnerability traceability, was changing the parameters of it and having it run the first time give me every single way that you can get to this vulnerability, and then adjusting the parameters, and the next time around being a run until you reach this vulnerability. Because, on one hand, knowing every path is very valuable, but on the other hand, if it can get there quickly, that's all you really need to know for whether you need to patch it. But then, yeah, then you add in the multi-agent systems where one agent's got access to a certain data set, it calls on the other agent that has access to a different data set that agent one has explicitly no permission to access, but now agent two is given it that data anyway. So have you actually secured it? And yeah, I think that's where, an AI bomb, what data it's built on, if the AI bomb is built to consider that, but it doesn't tell you what data it might get access to in other ways.
Yep. So this is exactly what I put to this, chat room. That this is the biggest problem: how to build it efficiently, how to produce it, correctly, and use it efficiently in a real world.
Yeah, and that use aspect, we're back to people.
So it's, we're already struggling with S bombs, and it sounds like we have a long way to go before AI bombs are really showing the information that we need to detect vulnerabilities. We might be able to detect changes between them, but there's so many different kinds of gaps, and that's why I go back to talk about Jing Chin's blog that she did on the new traps that AI has around security. It's a really good, well-written, simple to understand blog. There's so much that I don't think we can find in an AI bomb, but maybe the AI bombs are at least a way to start managing changes between two releases, even though it may not give us the kinds of lower level dependencies, which it wouldn't, that a software S-bomb does, right? It's a
Yeah.
starting place. It's a starting place.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It is a
My
start.
concern is that we fall in love with AI bombs because it's the new cool sounding thing, and there's no question they're important. But if you look at any enterprise's digital environment, how many traditional S-bombs do they have and how are those maintained? I mean, it's almost always, let's get the fundamentals right, folks, before we get all excited about really cool things we don't actually know how to do yet.
Definitely. And of course, I've heard it said by a number of people, AI really is just software. Um, so is an AI bomb really anything but a subset of your S bomb?
That's what I would call it. I would totally call it that.
And the only thing that I'll add is that, I resisted the term AI for a long time because I'm like, okay, this is, is this unsupervised or supervised machine learning? And I really wanted to understand what they were saying when they were talking about AI. I've given up on that, just FYI, because the majority of people are like, yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I'm like, okay, let's just go with AI. But yeah, at the end of the day, this is just software, baby.
Yep.
So
So, when we think about S-bombs, when I think about S-bombs, I think about finding vulnerable packages and remediating them, right? You update the dependency file with the corrected version. While that sounds very simple, you could have in a large enterprise, you could have literally 1,000 dependency files that uses the incorrect version. What are we looking at for AI remediation? And can AI help us with our current existing, just software like reachability and debloating that Kate mentioned earlier? Is AI something that can get us out of the problem that it may be also creating? Because I know AI generates a lot of code and it might pull in packages you don't necessarily need. So, are we ready for AI remediation of the dependency files? Use it, and if we know it's not reachable, take it out so debloat it. You know, where's your thoughts on that, John? Where are we at? Talk me off the ledge. I think it's something we could use.
Yes and no. Uh, it comes back to the people again. All right, so this is one of those where, a common complaint I'm hearing for your tier one analysts that are now they come out of college with their degree, right? They're ready to be a tier one analyst and they're given AI to do a lot of the pattern recognition that would otherwise have been a foundational part of the tier one analyst job. And now suddenly part of that is an aspect of the tier two analyst that they're being asked to do without that good history and repetition of the pattern recognition. So AI is really good at pattern recognition though. So it's an extremely valuable tool for recognizing that kind of bloat. You know it's bloat, you can train it, AI recognizes that it's bloat. You don't need to spend a month, 2 months, however long, training your analysts to recognize, yeah, that's bloat. We don't need that. We can cut that code. Same for, the reachability, same for, to Steve's point earlier, avoiding building some of those sort of obvious vulnerabilities, right? If you can get the AI to write the code without it in the first place. On the other hand, you need the people to sort of go through that experience to get that knowledge, get that background, so that if the AI is giving you an answer, you know whether it's realistic or not. You know that, yes, it actually is bloat. It's not a fundamental foundational piece of code that it wants to cut because it thinks it's bloat because it sees it everywhere and it doesn't understand why it's called upon. You, human, understand actually it's not called upon here, but it's used somewhere else. And if we cut it here, it can't be called upon somewhere else. So yes, I think yes and no, as long as we've got the skills behind using the tool. So I think coming back to our conversation a little bit earlier, getting some of that earlier training in, whether that be in the formal education, whether that be an aspect of, right, some of the online courses you can get to for free, of knowing that It's just going to give you what it's been trained to give you, and it's still up to you to actually make that decision. In terms of sort of the reachability, traceability type aspect, I think it's could be a really powerful tool, right? AI you can have it run overnight, look at your whole code base, come back in the morning, see all of the paths that it's identified, and now you can make a decision for what to actually do with that rather than needing several people to run over it over several days. Because again, that pattern recognition it's going to be able to catch. So yes, yes, and no.
Yeah, there was a grant proposal that the Navy did that we submitted for, and it was sort of on this topic, but it wasn't for lower level dependencies. What they want to do is use AI to interrogate issues, testing scripts, documentation, to determine what application level code they have in a product that they may be delivering out to, a warship, that's not used,
Mhm.
right? So not necessarily what open source packages down underneath, they're looking at the tip of the iceberg as opposed to underneath the water, which I thought was very interesting because in a way, if you can debloat your own software, take out stuff that you don't need anymore, then you are reducing your threat landscape, so to speak. But it's not dealing with where the majority of CVEs are coming from. Even though I think that data breaches, and we have somebody who's going to be talking about securing data in Azure environment, but data breaches probably do come a lot from the application level, even though something might give it a backdoor. So I guess my point being is that when we think about reachability and debloating, it doesn't always mean just the lower level dependencies. It could be the code that is being generated that's not being used. And I find that to be a problem in particular with AI generated code, that it generates more stuff than you need. It's like even when you ask it to do something simple for a document, it says, oh, I can do this and I can do that. And you're like, no, don't do any of that. So, I think we find ourselves in a crossroads where we're saying AI is really useful, but at the same time, it may be putting code out there that we don't want, even though it could be throwing away code that it knows we don't need. So I think that reachability and debloating is going to have to be a constant conversation that we have. And in that grant proposal, they said they did research and the existing debloating tools are only 37% accurate, which is not a good number.
Yeah, that's not ideal.
No. And I don't know if what they were talking about were using AI. I'm not sure. And I've not played with some of the debloating tools that have come out of some of the universities. But it is something that's happening. We are starting to talk about it. And maybe it's a good place to start on our own level of application code. I mean, we went through with Ortelius, Steve went through a massive debloating process and took out a ton of features and functions that we didn't believe were going to be useful and anybody would use, so why have them in there? Now we have them on standby should somebody want them, but the new version, he did a lot of cleanup. Let's just call it that. And sometimes that's all it is. Debloating is really, let's look at the application and clean up the stuff we don't need. And I don't think teams do that enough. And it doesn't require AI, it just requires a procedure, a process to say, this application's, been around for 4 or 5 years. Stuff that we put in it 2 years ago or 3 years ago may not be needed anymore. And is it time to rip it out? And sometimes that's a hard decision to make, but that is the essence of debloating.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the things I have to dive into is when AI generates the code for you, let's say you need to do a comparison, like a sort comparison, so you get like version strings sorting correctly. I have to check to see if AI goes out and finds a package that does sorting for me, a sort routine. and or if it goes in it just creates a simple comparison function. Because if it does bring in that an external package just to do a comparison string, you're now bringing all the weight and all those dependencies that that package is used for, even though that it could be just a 10-line function that it could generate internally and never bring in an external package. So I think that's going to be something that will come up down the road is, do we really need to have these external dependencies, or if it's simple enough, just go ahead and write the code into my own code base.
Yeah,
It's going to
maybe
be,
AI can do that without bringing in the function, right?
well, that's why that kind of comes
Yeah.
back around the question I asked John earlier is, how do you make what AI is generating more secure by default? Is it something from the prompt level, or is it going to be something from the model level?
Yeah, and now that we've gotten there, thinking about my answer again, it's going to have to be both. Um,
Yeah.
right, the prompt level definitely needs to be able to inspire, but yeah, the skills and whatnot, assuming you're using an agent for it, right, the skills for it would also need to have, right, that secure coder aspect as part of what it's calling upon. Um,
Yeah.
but
And I think Anthropic is sort of leading the conversation on this. They have had, there's been, news coming out from Anthropic about them building their models to have more security built into it. And quite honestly, they're the only model talking about it right now. So they're trying to kind of go back to the drawing board and think about generating code that's secure by design. So watch Anthropic for more on these topics.
definitely.
So, John, I know you have worked a lot in zero trust, so we cannot go through this without really, really quizzing you on zero trust. Steve Taylor has also worked a lot in zero trust. So, kind of define it for us, and let us know if there's tools and are the vendors doing it enough and what's being missed, and what do platform engineering teams need to know about zero trust?
I, Zero trust is what security should have been from the beginning, is sort of the easiest way to describe that. So, of course, term zero trust coined by John Kindervag, but a lot of the thought process behind it coming from the original Jericho Forum commandments focused on deperimeterization. So, it's not a great term, zero trust. We don't particularly love it, but vendors like it. The community likes it. It's catchy, so it's stuck. Um, the reality is zero trust is a mindset shift to security. It is the fundamental assumption that just because you have security in place, just because your network is secure, robust, strong, just because you have controls in place, does not mean that you will not be breached, does not mean that you do not have attackers inside your perimeter already. So you need to operate under the assumption that you're going to be breached, you're going to lose data, and as a result, you need to shift security as close to the individual assets as is feasible and cost effective. For legacy assets, for stuff like OT systems, that might mean using things like secured zones. For newer assets, especially for your data, that might mean really specifically tailoring the controls that you have around those data based on the value to your organization. Um, it also means shifting security as early as possible. So getting that security culture change across everybody. Security is not just the security team's job. Um, they're the people who are going to respond when there is an issue. They're the people who are going to be your liaisons with the security SMEs to help you get security built in early on. But if they're the only ones practicing security, it's not going to go well for you. So in terms of vendors, no vendor can claim to sell a complete zero trust solution, because if your people in your organization use a different tool than what the vendor is providing, even if they're not allowed to use that tool because the security process was annoying and they wanted to do their job more quickly, so good old-fashioned shadow IT, you still got the problem. So we're seeing things like the zero trust networks, which networks are an aspect of it, but it's not the end all be all. If you don't have your assets understood and managed according to their value, then you have too little protection around some asset and way too much around another. And now you're spending money disproportionately to where it's actually useful and valuable for you. Um, Ideally, we want to see security shifting to as much automated access as possible, so that just-in-time access, the bare minimum access that is necessary. We're seeing tools advance for being able to help progress that kind of thing, but that is ultimately the goal there. Yeah, and I
And I
do
know
like.
we're running out of time, but say something for us about zero trust between AI agents.
Ooh, ooh. Oh, that
We have a
comes to.
problem, right?
Yeah, I mean, that comes to the argument of, do your agents get their own identity? Um, because if they've got their own identity, then theoretically, under a zero trust approach, they might be that little bit more easy to manage. Um, but if they inherit all of your permissions and privileges and access rights, and you're not checking everything the agent does every single time, then that could be a problem really quickly.
So it sounds like you're a fan of having the agents have their own identity.
That's the more that I'm seeing about it, the more I think I'm leaning that direction. Um, Actual implementation of that, I don't know has been figured out fully just yet, but from what I've seen, I think that's making the most sense. I'm happy to be proven wrong though, if that is the case.
Well, there's some new tooling coming out. There's some new companies being born out of this that are addressing that in particular. I think Okta is looking at, providing some sort of agent identity.
Mhm.
Rogue, I know do you have an opinion on this?
Well, there's right now a lot of discussions around this, how to run agentic solutions in a secure way. So right now there's a lot of discussions about sandboxing every single agent and just allow agent to do whatever you want in that closed box, but monitor all behaviors or request everything outside. So, making sure that you keep it under control. So, most probably you heard about the open shell approach. So this is one of the solutions together with sandboxing containers, for example. This is also good solution to reduce the potential impact from agent being rogue. So yeah.
Well,
Well,
one of the things is we can't even get identity figured out for humans. So,
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. So if
because
one human has a
there's
bunch of agents, that's a problem.
well, we have no way to digitally identify a person. Um, world globally, companies can do it. The national labs will do it. Those type of places will do it because they're really worried about security. But for open source developers, you can pose as anybody. And that's how we get a lot of the supply chain attacks.
And on that, John, thank you so much. And for those of you who are on the call, this will be recorded. I will section this particular part of our event here off as its own presentation. If you found this information important, please forward it to other folks who are thinking about all of these different topics. In particular, the discussion around AI bombs I found was very helpful. So, John, thank you. Thank you so much for being part of this today. You did a great job and gave us a lot to think about. And is there any place that developers should go for more information on this topic? Is there some place at the open group that you might want to point to?
For Zero Trust in particular, yeah, the Open Group Library, we have our Zero Trust commandment standards, we have our first snapshot of a Zero Trust reference model. For organizational level practices around supply chain security, so some of that software stuff, the Open Group's Open Trusted Technology Forum is actively developing the next iteration of its standards, and bills of materials of all shapes, sizes, and forms are going to be foundational to that. So definitely keep an eye out there.
Great. Thank you.